The envelope wasn't supposed to be there. Plain white, unsealed, sitting on his desk like it was nothing important. Just another piece of paper in his meticulously organized home office. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I'd only gone in to leave the freshly folded laundry on his chair like I always did on Thursdays. But something about that envelope called to me. Maybe it was how carelessly it sat there, almost deliberately placed where I would see it. Or maybe it was my intuition screaming that something wasn't right after months of cold shoulders and late nights at the office. I stood frozen, staring at my name typed neatly on the front. Not handwritten. Typed. As if I didn't even deserve the personal touch of his penmanship after 15 years of marriage. My fingers trembled as I slid out the contents. The words blurred together at first, legal jargon swimming before my eyes, but certain phrases punched through the fog. Irreconcilable differences, dissolution of marriage, equitable distribution of assets, divorce papers, already drafted, already dated, waiting only for signatures. I remember the strange calm that washed over me. Not the hysteria you'd expect, not even tears. Just a cold, hollow feeling spreading from my chest to my fingertips. I carefully returned everything exactly as I found it and walked out, closing the door with a soft click that somehow sounded final in the silent house. 15 years reduced to clinical paragraphs about who gets what. 15 years of building a life, of surviving his mother's cancer and my miscarriage, of renovating this house room by room with our own hands. All of it. Dismissible with a signature. "Honey, I'm home." His voice echoed through the foyer 2 hours later. The same cheerful tone he'd used last night and the night before. The same man who'd kissed me goodbye that morning, telling me he'd try to make it home for dinner. I'd made his favorite meal. Lemon herb chicken with roasted potatoes. The irony wasn't lost on me as I called back. "In the kitchen." My voice didn't break, didn't even waver. He came in, loosening his tie, smiling that smile that once made my heart flutter. Now I wondered how long he'd been practicing his deceptions in the mirror. "Smells amazing in here," he said, coming behind me to kiss my cheek. His cologne, the one I'd given him for Christmas, lingered in the air between us. "Special occasion?" he asked, noticing the wine glasses, the candles I'd lit. I smiled, meeting his eyes directly. Just felt like doing something nice. We ate dinner with the usual small talk. His day at work, the neighbors' new landscaping, plans for the weekend, all while my mind replayed every moment of our recent months, recategorizing them from busy schedule to deliberate distance, from work stress to preparing an exit. "This is really good," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "You outdid yourself." I squeezed his fingers gently. "I'm glad you like it. I've been thinking about us a lot lately." Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Concern? I couldn't tell anymore. "Oh?" he managed. "I was wondering if you've noticed we've been drifting apart." My voice remained casual, conversational, as if asking about rain in the forecast. He set down his fork. "Work has been intense, but that's temporary. The Henderson project is almost wrapped up." The Henderson project. The perfect excuse for the late nights, the distraction, the emotional absence. I'd believed it completely until today. "I'm not blaming you," I said. "I think we both have things we need to address." Relief visibly washed over him. He thought I was providing him the perfect opening. "I've been thinking the same thing," he said, voice softening. "Maybe we should talk about where we're headed." I nodded, taking a sip of wine. "I agree, but not tonight. Tonight, let's just enjoy dinner. We can talk this weekend. Really talk. No distractions." He seemed surprised but pleased by my maturity, my reasonableness. What he didn't know was that I was already calculating, already planning. The woman he'd married, the woman he thought he knew, was never as naive as he believed. Later that night, I lay beside him in bed, listening to his even breathing, staring at the ceiling we'd painted together during our 3rd anniversary. I remember laughing so hard we'd gotten more paint on ourselves than the walls. I remember how he'd looked at me then, like I was everything. I turned toward him in the darkness, studying his profile. Who was this stranger who could sleep so peacefully beside the wife he was planning to discard? And who was I becoming in the wake of this betrayal? One thing was certain. If he wanted a divorce, he would get one. But not on his terms. Never on his terms. I closed my eyes, formulating the beginning of a plan. Morning would come soon enough. And with it, the first day of my new reality. A reality where I wasn't just a wife being left behind, but a woman reclaiming her power. The weekend never arrived. At least not the conversation he thought we'd have. Friday morning, he left for work with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to be home early so we could talk properly. I smiled and packed his lunch like I always did, slipping in his favorite cookies as if nothing had changed. The moment his car disappeared down our tree-lined street, I transformed. No more passive wife waiting for the axe to fall. I became a detective in my own marriage, excavating the ruins of what I once thought was solid ground. His password-protected laptop was my first target. After 15 years together, people get complacent about security. The combination was our anniversary date. How romantic of him to use the date of a commitment he was planning to break. The irony was almost too perfect. What I found made my stomach turn. Emails, hotel receipts, conversations with a work colleague named Allison that went far beyond professional boundaries, pictures they'd exchanged, plans they'd made, including a timeline for his divorce. Need to file by June so everything's clean by Christmas, he'd written to her. She'll be reasonable. She always is. Reasonable. The word burned into my brain. 15 years of compromising, of bending to avoid breaking us. And this was how he saw me. A reasonable obstacle to remove from his path. I methodically documented everything, forwarding copies to an email account he knew nothing about. Then I moved on to phone records, credit card statements, bank accounts. I didn't cry. Crying would come later, in private moments when strategy gave way to grief. For now, I needed clarity. By noon, I had the full picture. Their affair had started 8 months ago at a conference in Chicago. She was younger, of course she was, and worked in the marketing department. They'd been careful, but not careful enough for a woman with nothing left to lose. The real shock came when I discovered the financial trail. Over the past 6 months, he'd been systematically moving money into accounts I had no access to. Small amounts at first, then larger sums as his exit date approached. Our retirement savings, our vacation fund, even part of the emergency money we'd set aside for future medical expenses. I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and notes, feeling as if I were looking at the crime scene of my marriage. The magnitude of his betrayal went beyond the affair. He was trying to ensure I'd be left with as little as possible. Always protect yourself first, my grandmother used to say. Men come and go, but self-respect is forever. I'd thought her cynical when I was young and in love. Now her words rang with prophetic wisdom. I called in sick to my part-time job at the library. This was more important than cataloging books today. Then I made 3 appointments. With a divorce attorney, a financial advisor, and, this one surprised even me, a therapist. If I was going to navigate this battlefield, I needed allies and a clear head. By the time he texted that he'd be home by 6, I had erased all evidence of my investigation. The house was spotless, dinner was in the oven, and I looked exactly as I always did. The dependable wife he was counting on to remain ignorant until he was ready to drop his bomb. Looking forward to our talk, he texted. Been thinking about us all day. I bet you have, I thought, sending back a simple heart emoji. Let him interpret that however he wanted. He arrived home bearing flowers. Carnations, not my favorite roses he'd know if he'd been paying attention the past decade and a half. I accepted them with a genuine-looking smile. You look beautiful, he said, studying me as if trying to pre-gauge my emotional state. Just felt like putting in some effort, I replied, twirling in the dress I knew he liked. Since we're having an important conversation. Dinner was excruciating. He kept glancing at me, rehearsing whatever speech he'd prepared in his head. I maintained pleasant conversation, asking about his day, nodding at appropriate moments, all while my mind catalogued every lie, every subtle shift of his eyes. So, he finally said as we cleared the plates, about what you mentioned yesterday. I looked at him expectantly, vulnerability carefully arranged on my face. I think we've been growing apart for a while now, he continued, voice gentle as if breaking bad news to a child. We want different things. Maybe we've just been going through the motions. I sat down slowly. I felt something was wrong, I admitted. But I thought it was just a phase. Marriages have ups and downs, right? He nodded eagerly, relieved I wasn't falling apart. Exactly. Sometimes people just evolve in different directions. Is there someone else? I asked quietly, watching his face closely. The panic flickered for just a moment before he composed himself. This isn't about anyone else. This is about us not being happy together anymore. Another lie to add to the collection. I reached across the table and took his hand, feeling him relax at what he perceived as acceptance. I need some time to process this, I said, my voice breaking just enough to seem authentic. Can we not make any decisions right now? I just need a little space to think. The relief on his face was palpable. I'd just handed him exactly what he wanted. More time to prepare his exit while I remained complacently in the dark. Of course, he said, squeezing my hand. Take all the time you need. There's no rush. No rush. Except for the June deadline he'd promised Allison. Except for the money he was still moving every week. Except for the lawyer who'd already drafted the papers sitting in his desk drawer. That night, I cried real tears. Not for the man lying beside me, but for the woman I used to be. The trusting woman who believed in forever promises. She needed to be mourned before the new me could fully emerge. And emerge she would. For the next 3 weeks, I became the actress of a lifetime. I played the role of the wife processing her failing marriage. Sometimes sad, sometimes hopeful, always reasonable. I suggested marriage counseling, which he reluctantly agreed to while finding excuses to postpone actually scheduling any appointments. Meanwhile, beneath this performance, I was building the framework for his downfall, brick by careful brick. My first meeting with the divorce attorney, Diane Reeves, a shark in an elegant pantsuit, set the tone for everything that followed. So he doesn't know you've found the papers? She asked, reviewing the evidence I'd brought. No. And he doesn't know that I know about the affair or the money he's been hiding. She smiled for the first time since I'd entered her office. That's our advantage. Men like your husband count on shock and awe. They expect tears, begging, confusion. They don't expect strategy. Together, we crafted a plan that was both legal and devastating. First priority, protecting my financial interests. He's making a classic mistake, my financial advisor explained during our second meeting. He's leaving electronic breadcrumbs everywhere, and the timing of these transfers, all after the affair began, makes it clear this was premeditated financial deception. I followed their advice meticulously. I opened new accounts at different banks. I gathered documentation of all our assets, including the inheritance I'd received when my father died, money that had gone into our home renovation, which he was now claiming as primarily his investment. The therapist helped in unexpected ways. Dr. Keller didn't just help me process my grief and rage. She helped me understand the psychology I was up against. He's following a classic pattern, she explained. He's rewriting your marital history to justify his actions. In his mind, he needs to believe you were already unhappy to excuse his betrayal. So he actually believes his own lies? I asked. People rarely see themselves as villains in their own story, she said. Understanding that gives you power. Power. That's what had been stolen from me. Not just my husband's fidelity or our future, but my agency in my own life. Taking it back became my obsession. At home, the charade continued. We existed in a strange limbo where we both pretended things might work out while knowing they wouldn't. He grew more distracted, taking more calls in another room, coming home later. I pretended not to notice while documenting everything. The turning point came from an unexpected source. His mother called one Wednesday afternoon while he was at work. Is everything okay with you two? She asked after our usual pleasantries. Thomas has been acting strange, asking questions about the family cabin and whether it was ever in your name. The family cabin, a property his grandfather had left specifically to him, a place he'd promised would always be ours, a place not mentioned in any of the financial documents I'd found. Everything's fine, I lied smoothly. We're just updating some paperwork. You know how he likes to keep things organized. After we hung up, I added this new piece to my puzzle. He wasn't just hiding our marital assets. He was actively trying to shield his inherited property that, under the laws of our state, should remain his separate asset anyway. His unnecessary deception revealed both his greed and his ignorance. I called Diane immediately. "This actually helps us," she said. "It shows pattern and intent. Keep gathering information, but don't confront him yet. Timing is everything." Timing indeed. The following week brought an unexpected opportunity when he announced he needed to go to Atlanta for 3 days. "The Henderson project is in its final phase," he explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's crucial I'm there in person." The Henderson project, his favorite fiction. I checked the calendar and realized with grim satisfaction that it coincided with Allison's birthday. Based on their messages, they were planning a romantic getaway disguised as a business trip. "I understand," I said, kissing his cheek. "I'll miss you, but I know how important your work is." The moment his flight took off, I kicked my plan into high gear. I had 72 hours of freedom to execute the next phase. First, I visited our safe deposit box, removing important documents and irreplaceable family jewelry, pieces my mother had given me that I wasn't about to let become negotiation chips. Then I met with our family's accountant, the one who'd done our taxes for a decade, and asked innocent questions that revealed exactly how much my husband had been hiding from the IRS, not just from me. "These consulting fees should have been reported as income," he explained, frowning at the documents I'd accidentally discovered. "This could create significant problems if there's an audit." Next, I visited his parents for tea, something I often did when he traveled. His mother, always fond of me, was especially warm that day. "Thomas is lucky to have such a devoted wife," she said, patting my hand, "especially with how demanding his job has become." I smiled, sipping my tea. "He works so hard for our future. I just try to support him however I can." The conversation drifted naturally to family matters, including his sister's recent divorce. "Such a messy affair," his mother sighed. "If only they'd been honest with each other from the start." "Honesty is everything in a marriage," I agreed, my heart pounding as I carefully added, "That's why I've always made sure Thomas knows everything about our finances and family matters." I left with warm hugs and a pie she'd baked for my hard-working Thomas, and with the seeds planted for what would come next. The final piece fell into place when I received a call from a private investigator I'd hired. He'd been following Allison's movements and confirmed what I suspected. She wasn't in Atlanta with my husband. She was at a conference in Chicago with her actual husband, which meant my husband was lying to everyone. To me about the divorce timeline, to Allison about leaving me immediately, and to both of us about his whereabouts now. As I sat in our home office, surrounded by evidence of his duplicity and my countermeasures, a strange calm settled over me. The hurt was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else, a cold certainty that justice was within reach. I opened my laptop and began composing 3 crucial emails that wouldn't be sent until precisely the right moment. Everything was in place. All I needed now was for him to make his move. He returned from Atlanta, sunburned and distant. The tan lines suggested somewhere tropical rather than conference rooms. Another lie to add to the collection. I noticed him watching me carefully, gauging my mood, my receptiveness. The time for his grand revelation was approaching. I could feel it. "How was your trip?" I asked as we got ready for bed that night. "Productive, exhausting, the usual." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. "I missed you," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "The house feels empty without you." Something like guilt flickered across his face. Good. Let him carry that into what came next. The following morning over breakfast, he finally made his move. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, stirring his coffee with unusual intensity. "About us, about our future." I set down my toast, arranging my features into an expression of concerned attention. "What about our future? I don't think this is working anymore. Us, I mean." He reached across the table, a rehearsed gesture of compassion. "We've grown apart. We want different things." I allowed my eyes to fill with tears. Is there someone else? He shook his head too quickly. This isn't about anyone else. This is about us not making each other happy anymore. The same script from weeks ago, word for word, as if he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. I see, I said quietly. I've been talking to a lawyer, he continued, gaining confidence from my apparent submission. Just to understand our options. I think we can make this clean, simple. We've always been good at communicating. I nodded slowly, letting a tear fall. When did you decide this? It's been coming for a while, he said, voice gentle with practiced sympathy. I think we both know that. And the papers? When were you going to tell me about those? His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. What papers? The divorce papers in your desk drawer. The ones already filled out with my name typed on them. The ones dated 3 weeks ago. The color drained from his face. You went through my desk? I was putting away your laundry, I said simply. But that's not really the point, is it? He recovered quickly, shifting to his reasonable, logical persona. I was going to discuss everything with you first. Those were just preliminary to understand the process. Like the process of moving our savings into accounts under only your name? Or the process of claiming the cabin as separate property when we've used joint funds to maintain it for a decade? That kind of process? His eyes widened. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling before him, and I could see him scrambling to adjust. It's not what you think, he began. It never is, I interrupted, my voice stronger now. Just like Allison isn't what I think, right? Just a colleague? Just someone you've been planning a future with since Chicago last year? He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You've been spying on me? No, Thomas. I've been protecting myself from you. I remained seated, calm. There's a difference. This is exactly why, he began, then stopped himself. Why what? Why you decided to cheat instead of having an honest conversation? Why you decided to hide money instead of respecting the partnership we built? Please, enlighten me. His defensive anger shifted to calculation. I could almost see him reassessing, looking for a new angle. I never meant to hurt you. Things got complicated. Feelings changed. It happens in marriages. Yes, it does, I agreed. What doesn't just happen is systematic financial deception and premeditated betrayal. He paced the kitchen, running his hand through his hair. What do you want? Money? The house? Is that what this confrontation is about? I smiled for the first time that morning. No, Thomas. This confrontation is about consequences. I reached for my phone and pulled up an email. While you were enjoying your business trip, which we both know wasn't in Atlanta and wasn't with Allison, who was in Chicago with her husband, I took the liberty of ensuring everyone knows exactly who you are. His face paled. What did you do? Nothing yet. But unless you agree to my terms for our divorce, these emails will automatically send in 24 hours. I showed him the screen. Emails addressed to his boss detailing how he'd been falsifying expense reports to fund hotel rooms with Allison, to his parents with evidence of his affair and financial deceptions, and to the IRS regarding certain unreported income he'd been hiding. You wouldn't, he whispered. I absolutely would. Just like you would have left me financially devastated without a second thought. I stood up, finally at eye level with him. But unlike you, I'm giving you a choice. I slid a folder across the table. My terms are fair. I get the house, which my inheritance largely paid to renovate, half of all marital assets, including those you've conveniently relocated, and full ownership of the small business we started together that you've been pretending is worthless. He opened the folder with shaking hands, scanning the documents my attorney had prepared. This is extortion, he said weakly. No, Thomas, this is consequences. You tried to destroy me quietly. Did you really think I would just accept that with grace? And if I refuse, then the emails send, and we do this the hard way, with your reputation, career, and family relationships in tatters. I checked my watch. You have until this time tomorrow to sign. My lawyer is expecting your call to confirm. I gathered my purse and jacket. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. You can reach me on my cell if you decide to be reasonable. As I headed for the door, he called after me, voice cracking with the first genuine emotion I'd heard from him in months. Wait, please, we can talk about this. I turned back, meeting his eyes one last time. That's the thing, Thomas. We could have talked about anything. You could have told me you weren't happy. You could have asked for a divorce honestly. Instead, you chose deception at every turn. The realization dawning on his face was almost worth the pain of the past months. He wasn't facing the compliant, reasonable wife he'd expected. He was facing a woman who had methodically dismantled his every contingency plan. "I'll be waiting for your decision," I said, closing the door behind me. By noon the next day, my lawyer called. He had signed everything. Every single term accepted without negotiation. Victory tasted both sweeter and more bitter than I had imagined. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Clean, efficient, and entirely on my terms. The emails were never sent. They had served their purpose as leverage. His secret remained his to manage, though I suspected Allison had her own revelations about who she'd actually involved herself with. I stayed in our house, my house now, repainting every room in colors he had vetoed over the years. The master bedroom became a soothing sage green instead of the beige he'd insisted was timeless. The kitchen transformed from sterile white to a warm terracotta that made morning coffee feel like an embrace. With each brushstroke, I reclaimed another piece of myself. The financial settlement ensured my security, but more importantly, it represented justice. Not vengeance. I took only what was rightfully mine, but the restoration of balance that his deception had tried to destroy. Friends and family were surprised by our split, but I maintained a dignified silence about the details. "Sometimes people grow in different directions," I would say, echoing his words with private irony. I had no interest in destroying him publicly. Watching him understand the full measure of his miscalculation had been satisfaction enough. 6 months after the divorce, my doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find Thomas standing there, looking both familiar and strange, like a photograph slightly out of focus. "Can we talk?" he asked, hands shoved in his pockets like a contrite schoolboy. I considered closing the door but instead stepped aside. Curiosity, not longing, motivated my decision. He walked through the house, noticing all the changes with visible surprise. "It looks different." "It is different," I replied simply, leading him to the kitchen, now my favorite room in the house. He sat at the counter, declining my polite offer of coffee. "I wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm doing well," I said, and meant it. "Why are you here, Thomas?" He stared at his hands for a long moment. "Allison and it didn't work out." I felt nothing at this revelation. No satisfaction, no vindication, not even surprise. "I'm sorry to hear that. I've been thinking about us, about what happened, about what I threw away." He finally looked up, eyes seeking something in mine. I made the biggest mistake of my life. There it was, the moment some part of me had perhaps been waiting for. The moment of his regret, his recognition of what he'd lost. The moment where, in a different story, the wronged wife might soften, might consider reconciliation. But this wasn't that story, and I wasn't that woman anymore. "What exactly are you hoping for here?" I asked gently. "A second chance," he said, voice breaking. "To try again, knowing what I know now. I never appreciated what we had until it was gone." I studied him, this man I'd once built my world around. There was sincerity in his eyes now that had been absent in those final months together. Perhaps he had learned something. Perhaps he had changed. But so had I. "Thomas," I said carefully, "what we had is gone. Not just because of what you did, but because of who I've become since then. I'm not the same person who would have forgiven anything to keep our marriage intact. You don't have to decide now," he pressed. "We could start slow. Dinner sometime. Conversations. Rebuilding." I shook my head. The foundation is too damaged. And honestly, I've found more peace in this new life than I had in our final years together. "Is there someone else?" he asked, unconsciously echoing my question from months before. I smiled. "This isn't about anyone else. This is about me being happy with who I am now." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He nodded slowly, accepting the symmetry of the moment. As I walked him to the door, he paused on the threshold. "I really am sorry. For everything. You deserved better." "Yes," I agreed simply. "I did." After he left, I sat on my porch swing, a new addition I'd installed last month, and watched the sunset paint the sky in colors too complex to name. I felt no triumph in his suffering, no joy in his regret. Only a quiet certainty that the universe had a strange way of balancing its accounts. The woman I was a year ago would have given anything to hear him beg for another chance. The woman I am now understands that some endings, however painful, make necessary beginnings possible. I've learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It can, instead, refine you, burning away illusions and leaving something stronger in their place. Not hardened or bitter, but clear-eyed and resilient. Sometimes the most powerful response to someone trying to write you out of your own story is to pick up the pen and start a new chapter entirely. One where you are both author and protagonist. One where happiness isn't dependent on another person's choices. That's the twist neither of us saw coming.